Okay, students, today we're going to be going over your Test 3 tutorial. This is like your practice test. The actual Test 3 will be 20 questions taken from the sections listed. There's also a homework assignment that is just like a practice test that you can work as many as 10 times, and the highest score will be counted as your homework. The actual Test 3 will be taken on your own computer. It is not proctored, and you will only have one chance or one submission for the actual Test 3. Now, question number 1 deals with the slope of a line passing through 2 points. Remember the slope formula, and it is permissible for you to have this formula on a sheet of paper next to you while you're completing the homework and taking the test. In the first ordered pair, we have our x1, y1, and then we have our x2, y2 with the second ordered pair. So we substitute in the values as I have them listed. The 6 and the 3 are the two y values, and I subtract those. The 5 and the 4 are the two x values, and I subtract those. When I work this out, I will get 3 over 1, which is simply 3. So the slope is 3. Since this slope is positive, it rises from left to right. Had it been negative, the line would have been falling. Question number 2 uses the same general formula. y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. The first ordered pair is my x1, y1. The second ordered pair is my x2, y2. So I substitute in the values. I have a -9 and another -9 as the y coordinates. Remember, we must subtract those. I have a 4 and a +2 as the x coordinates, and we must subtract those. Notice when I subtract the -9s, when I subtract that negative, it becomes positive. So in the numerator, I have 0. The bottom of the fraction is 2. 0 over 2 is equal to 0. So that is a slope. The slope is 0. When you have a slope of 0, that is always a horizontal line. Question number 3 uses this same formula. Now my first ordered pair is my x1, y1. My second ordered pair is my x2, y2. So I substitute in the values. I have an 8 and a -3. Those are my y coordinates. I must subtract those. I have a -6 and another -6 as my x coordinates, and I must subtract those. In both cases, when you subtract the negative, that becomes positive. So my answer gives me 11 over 0. Now remember, anytime you have a 0 denominator, that means your fraction is undefined. If you have an undefined fraction, then we also say the slope is undefined. The slope is only undefined if the line is vertical. Now, question number 4. We have to give the slope and the y-intercept of the equation given. This equation is in the form of y equals mx plus b, which is called the slope-intercept equation. Again, this is another handy formula to have next to you as you complete your homework and exam. I would say that the slope, which is the coefficient of x, is 4/5. The y-intercept, which is the constant number behind the x, is -4. When I go to graph this, I will plot the point on -4, and then since my slope is 4/5, and we know that stands for rise over run, the top number tells me to go up 4 units. That would be my rise. And then it tells me to go to the right 5 units. That is what we refer to as the run in the slope. So I start from the -4 and I count up 4. Then I go over 5 and I click the second point. When you're working it in my math lab, you will simply need to click 2 points. When you click the second point, the line will appear. Question number 5 is simply stated as y equals 6. Anytime you have y equals a constant number, you can remember that this is always a horizontal line. So you do not have to identify the slope and the y-intercept. What you will do is go up to +6 on the y-axis, and you will click on a point. Since this is a horizontal line, you can go anywhere to the right or the left. It does not matter how far. And click a second point so that the horizontal line appears. And that is it. The next question has simply x equals -6. Anytime you have x equals a constant number, there is no y term given. This will always be a vertical line. What you will do is go on the x-axis and you will plot the number given. My number is -6. So I click on the point -6 on the x-axis. Since I know this is a vertical line, I can go above or below, and I will click on a second point. Doesn't matter how far out. As long as it's above or below, you will see the vertical line appear. Now in this next equation, we are asked to rewrite an equation into slope-intercept form. Remember, slope-intercept form is the mx plus b. So I will take the 4x plus y plus 1 equals 0, and I will solve it for y. I will need to take the +1 and subtract that on both sides. I will then take the 4x, move that over with subtraction, and that will leave the y. So when I solve this for y, I will get -4x minus 1. That is the answer. Y equals -4x minus 1. The slope of this line is the -4. It is the coefficient of x. The y-intercept is -1. It is that constant number in the back, which is behind the x. Now I will use this to graph. I will go to the y-axis and go down to -1 and click a point on the -1 value. My slope is -4. When it's -4, I normally put that over 1 since that's a real number, an integer. The -4 means I will count down 4 units. Again, that is my rise. Even though it is a negative, it's more of a fall. And then I will count to the right 1 unit. Now you will always start counting at the y-intercept. So I count down 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I count to the right 1 unit. I will click directly there and the line will appear. Now in this next equation, I'm asked to find the equation in both the point slope and the slope-intercept. We had said the slope-intercept form is mx plus b. But before I can get an equation in that form, I must use the point slope form. The point slope form is y minus y1 equals m slope times x minus x1. Now, in the given information, the ordered pair will be the x1, y1. Then I look at this equation to find my slope. The slope here is -3. I am asked to find a line that is parallel. Parallel means same slope. You must use equal slopes to have a line that's parallel to another. So let me substitute in what I know. Using the point slope formula, that is y, subtract my y value, -3, equals the slope, same slope, open parenthesis, x minus my x coordinate. I can simplify this to y plus 3 equals -3 times x plus 2. That would be my first answer. Do not simplify it any further. You'll simplify it further for the second answer. All right, so this is my first answer. My second answer must be in the slope-intercept form. So I take the first answer and solve. My first answer, y plus 3 equals -3 times x plus 2. I use the distributive property, and I get -3x minus 6. Then I subtract 3 on both sides, and I get -3x minus 9. This would be the second answer. Again, I'm asked for two versions of the answer. The point slope form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. The slope intercept is y equals mx plus b. This time my ordered pair is the x1, y1. The slope of the line that is given is it's positive 1/2. But I am asked to find a line that's perpendicular. Perpendicular lines cross each other at a right angle. So perpendicular slopes have opposite signs and they're reciprocals. So as some of my students in my own ground classes say, you have to change your sign and you have to flip the slope. So the slope that we use will be not positive but negative, and it will not be 1/2, it will be 2/1, which is simply a -2. That's what we must use. Now to get the point slope formula, which is the first answer, I will substitute in what I know. Y minus -2 equals -2, this is my new slope, times x minus the 8 coordinate. You could simplify this just a bit by changing that double negative to a positive, but do not simplify it any further. That would be my first answer. Now, for the second answer, we do simplify, so I use a distributive property, and I get -2x plus 16, and then I subtract 2 on both sides, and I get y equals -2x plus 14. This second answer goes for the slope intercept. Now we look at the domain of a function. Since this is a fraction, we do not want an undefined fractions. No undefined fractions. A couple problems back, we realized that when you have a 0 denominator, that's what would give you an undefined fraction. So we want no 0 denominator. What we will do is we take the denominator, x minus 15, and we put that not equal to 0. Now I solve for x. I would add 15 to both sides, so x is not equal to positive 15. That is my domain, but it must be written in interval notation. So picture a number line with 0 in the middle. 15 is a positive number over here on the right. We do not want to use 15, but we could use anything larger than 15, and we could also use anything smaller than 15. So in interval notation, that would be negative infinity, comma, 15, union, 15, comma, infinity. And for me, that would be choice B. Now we must find the domain of a function that's a square root. In this case, when we're working with real-life functions, you want to avoid imaginary numbers. So those are the numbers that have the I, the square root negative 1. So we want this to be positive. So I put x plus 13 greater than or equal to 0. You will always take that radicand and set it greater than or equal to 0. That means it would be positive. And then you solve. This time I solve by subtracting 13. So my true domain is x has to be greater than or equal to negative 13. When I graph that, negative 13 is to the left of 0, and since that's greater than or equal to, that's a closed circle shaded to the right. It means I could use the 13, and I could also use anything larger than that negative 13. In interval notation, that would be choice A. Bracket negative 13, comma, infinity, parentheses. Now we're going to talk about combining two functions. I'm given two functions, f of x and g of x, and I'm asked to subtract. So I basically want to take the functions and subtract the g from the f. The g is 2x minus 8. I'm going to put that in parentheses just to make sure I don't make a sign mistake. The f of x is 6x minus 4. Again, I'll put that in parentheses. And I want to subtract. When you subtract, this subtraction sign will distribute to the terms behind it. So that's a negative 2x and a positive 8. The 6x minus 4 just comes straight down. Now what you'll do, that you have distributed the negative, you will combine like terms. So 6x minus 2x would be 4x, and then negative 4 and positive 8 would be positive 4. This would be your solution. F minus g is equal to 4x plus 4. Answer choice C. I'm now going to operate on these two functions by multiplying. FG means to multiply these two. So again, I will put the 6x plus 7 in parentheses, and I will put the 9x minus 3 in parentheses, and I'm going to multiply. When you multiply two binomials like this, you normally use the FOIL method. FOIL stands for first terms, outer terms, inner terms, and last terms. So I multiply the first term, 6x times the first term, 9x. 6x times 9x would be 54x squared. That's my first term. Then I multiply the outer term, 6x times the negative 3. When I multiply that, that's negative 18x. That's the outer terms. I would then multiply the 7 times the 9x. Multiplying gives me 63x. That's the innermost terms. And then last, I have the 7 and a negative 3. Multiply those, I have negative 21, and that's my last terms. Here, I must combine like terms. They will normally be the two terms in the middle. A negative 18x with a positive 63x will give me 45x. Then I will bring down the 54x squared, and the minus 21. And I see that my answer choice is answer D. Now we're going to talk about the composite function. I am asked to find g of f of x. What this means is I take the f of x and I actually substitute it inside the g of x. Now the f of x is negative 3x plus 4. When I take g of that, I'm literally going to take the negative 3x plus 4 and substitute it in place of the x of the other function. So that will give me 4 times the negative 3x plus 4 and then plus 2. To simplify, I use the distributive property. I get negative 12x and positive 16 plus 2, which is negative 12x plus 18. Final answer. And that answer is my answer A. Now I have to find the inverse of this one-to-one function. To find the inverse, remember the following steps. Step 1, change the f of x notation to the letter y. So I will take f of x equals negative 3x minus 7 and rewrite that as y equals negative 3x minus 7. Step 2 is to swap or interchange the places of x and y. No signs will change, but the x goes in place of the y, and the y takes the place of the x. And then the last step is to solve for y. So I can add 7 to both sides. I have x plus 7 equals negative 3y. Then I would divide by negative 3. So my inverse is equal to the x plus 7 over negative 3. Now that inverse is my answer number D. Notice that the y is replaced by this notation for inverse, and I have the x plus 7 over 3, and it's of course negative. Now we'll use another formula. This is the distance between a pair of points. The distance formula is the square root of x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. So this is my x1, my y1 would be the first ordered pair. The x2, y2 is my second ordered pair. So I substitute in the values I know. I know that I have a 9 minus a 2. Then I have an 8 minus a 1. Simplifying further, that becomes 7 squared plus 7 squared, which is 49 plus 49, which is the square root of 98. Now the square root of 98 is approximately found by using the calculator. If you have a scientific calculator, you can easily put that in, and the square root of 98 is approximately, we're going to round to 2 decimal places, that would be 9.90. Actually, my calculator has 9.89949, but if I want to go 2 places, notice the third place was a 9, so that would round up. So my approximation is 9.90. However, you're also asked to give the exact answer using radicals. If you recall from earlier algebra studies, if you take the square root of 98 and you factor that, that is really 2 times 49, and 49 is 7 times 7. That is a perfect square. So the square root of 49 is 7, whereas you have this 2 as a remainder. So you would write that as square root of 2 behind. Thus, the first answer, which is the exact radical answer, is 7 square root of 2. Now we're going to find the midpoint of a line segment. The midpoint formula is x2 plus x1 divided by 2, comma, y2 plus y1 divided by 2. My x1, y1 are the first coordinates. My x2, y2 are the second coordinates. And I simply plug in the numbers. So I have 6 plus 4 over 2, 10 plus 2 over 2, which simplifies to be 10 over 2, or 5, and 12 over 2, which is 6. So my ordered pair, written in ordered pair form, would be 5, comma, 6. Now we're going to write the standard form of an equation of a circle. An equation of a circle is given by the formula x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. The r is the radius. This is again another formula you would want to have handy when you complete your homework or your test 3. The h and the k are the coordinates for the center. Notice that the signs change. In the formula it said negative h, but when I write it down in the vertex I use a positive h. Same way with the k. So when I replace this back into the formula, I will have x minus 8 squared, change that positive to a negative, plus y minus 6 squared, and that will equal to 10 squared. Since we're asked to simplify our answer, we would simply square the 10. You do not have to do the FOIL method and get rid of the parentheses. So this would be my final answer for the equation of the circle. Now I'm going to graph the equation of a circle. First, I want to find the center and the radius. The center is going to be 0, 0 because there are no other values given next to the x or the y. The radius is going to be the square root of 36, which is 6. So to graph this in my math lab, you would first choose the graphing tool that looks like a circle. Once you choose that graphing tool, you click on the center, which is 0, and you count out 6 units because that is the radius. So you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in any direction, and you will click on that second point. You will notice when you click on that second point, it will populate an entire screen that will look like your circle. Now, what is the domain? The domain, remember, would be the x values. The domain, the numbers on the x-axis, range from -6 to +6. The range, which would be the y values on the y-axis, those range from -6 to +6. Now we're going to complete the square and write this equation in standard form. Notice in this equation given, the first 3 terms form a perfect square trinomial. So x squared plus 4x plus 4 will factor perfectly as x plus 2 times x plus 2, which is the same thing as x plus 2 squared. Then I will take the second 3 terms, which would be y squared plus 18y plus 81. Again, if I use my factoring techniques, that's y plus 9, which is y plus 9 squared. Then I bring over the plus sign in the 64, and here I have the equation of my circle. Now the vertex, remember, we must change the signs from the standard equation, so that'd be a -2, -9, and then the radius is the square root of the 64, which is the 8. So the correct answer from me would be B. Good luck on your test.